Welcome to Sidetracked with your hosts, Scott Culbertson and Bo Hotchkiss of the band Blue Vino. Please be calm and tear it down.
That's really killing the song for me, man.
What's killing the song?
That intro. Yeah, I'll do the next one. I got this. Okay.
All right. Yeah, you go ahead. You go right ahead. Right. I'm ready.
You better be. Brace yourself, Effie.
All right. You've got a year.
No foreplay. I'm sticking it right in.
Okay, so today we've got a special guest. He is currently waiting in the green room. Adam Kokesh from Adam versus the Man, a pretty well-known podcaster at this point and activist. Adam, if you're ready, go ahead and press 1.
I've never seen this green room.
Yeah, it's a virtual green room. Adam, you there?
I'm right here.
Hey
what's
Adam,
going
nice
on?
to talk to you.
Welcome to Sidetracked.
Hold on a second. I gotta get another call. Sorry. Sorry about that. Hey, and I gotta start with a more important apology here. That I was supposed to be on the show before and totally screwed up the timing, and it was the most unprofessional thing I've ever done.
Don't worry about that.
I wish that was the most unprofessional thing I've ever done, but it was definitely up there.
Well,
and I'm really honored for the opportunity to talk to you
all
guys.
the time. He doesn't inform people, and a lot of times he tells people they're going to be a guest, everybody but them, and then they're like, "What? I'm supposed to call in? What am I supposed to? Who are you people?" And I
was gonna say it took McAfee about the third time to actually get him on the show. Mainly because it was mostly my fault because I didn't know how to handle getting a hold of him.
So you're the guy. You're the lone protester. That's what I've been calling you, because Bo here is another lone protester. I just got to say hats off to you to show up to the protest and not see anybody and get out of the car anyway. Okay? Because that takes balls, dude. And then what you did, you're the guy that took in the shotgun into D.C. and loaded it and everything, right?
Yep, that guy.
You're hats off to you, dude. That took balls.
Well,
and it took
it
took what the government 3 days to respond.
I used my hands, but no. If I may present something that I think might be helpful to your listeners who appreciate that kind of high risk stunt civil disobedience. A lot of people say that I'm brave, and it's not really true. And if I can explain it to you in a way that would help you, I've been able to figure out what it is that I do differently, and I think it helps other people have confidence in their activism. And I'm not particularly brave. I just have more confidence in my calculations around risk. And there's two ways that I do this on both sides of the equation, the risk side and the reward side. And the main thing on the risk side is the fear of interacting with government, the fear of consequences, the fear of going to jail, the fear of getting arrested, the fear of getting abused by a cop. I've been roughed up by cops a handful of times. I did 4 months in jail, 2 months in solitary. And a lot of people understand that every time you interact with a cop, your chances of suddenly dying go way up. And that's a sad fact of living in a police state. However, you're still relatively safe if you know what you're doing in civil disobedience. And I was trained by a lot of great activists on the left as a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. That was my first real full-time activism, and I was in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team. And I've been arrested about 36 times. Most of those, I say about 2/3, 3/4, were like really stupid protesting arrests where you're just protesting in the wrong place at the wrong time, sitting in an intersection, climbing a wall, or just, walking up to a police line and they say, you're not supposed to be here. And I say, well, the First Amendment says that's an unlawful order, so I'm just going to be here. And they're kind of catch and release arrests, citations, and things like that. But
right, yeah, that's what they used to do to us when we protested the test site. Is and it wasn't even like they'd take us to jail. They'd round us up, put us on a bus, and then they'd drive us out to this drop point and just let us go. And it was funny because we'd leave our cars there. Mm-hmm. So it was this weird little cycle where they'd pick us up and take us out to our cars, and then it was like we'd go home after that.
Yep.
Yeah, you might want to tell them what test site you're talking about.
Oh, the Nevada test site where they test the nuclear weapons. Yeah, I used to hold up the sign.
That's a good place to be protesting.
I was the guy that held up the sign that says, "We know it works. Now you're just being dicks about it." Yep.
So I
well, now it took the government 3 days to respond, though, to even notice. Is that right?
Right, because I did a YouTube video on July 4th. I think it was actually July 9th, 5 days later, that we got raided. And when they raided my house, it was with more men than they sent after bin Laden, and with 2 helicopters and an armored vehicle, and it was nuts. It was one of those raids. And it's sad that you have to say one of those raids these days, because it's like it's not that special, But it was initiated by the United States Park Police, federal agency, so they had to communicate with local agencies and brought in several other federal agencies, and all the things that they can use as an excuse to justify their budget, they'll do, right? So,
right.
What a lot of people fail to do on the risk side of the equation is quantify the consequences. And I wish I could say that, I did this intentionally or that there was some deliberate thought process behind it, but it really was by happy accident of my activism with Iraq Veterans Against the War, where it's just like, I'm an anti-war veteran. I tortured and helped kill people in Iraq. It doesn't matter if I get arrested. I'm just going to throw myself at the machine and do whatever it takes to bring attention to this cause. I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop the war if I can, or do whatever I can in that effort. And I suppose in your activism and when you're looking at nuclear weapons, you got to feel the same way when you're up against the most destructive force. You have that sense of righteousness. But for me as a former Marine, it was even like, I should be dead right now. In a just world, I would be dead. What difference does it make if I get arrested for protesting? Who cares? So that really helps me be in a position to say, it doesn't matter if I get arrested. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to get out there. And what I realized from all this is that the risk is really pretty low. And, most people just, when they're doing the calculation, they say, hey, do you want to get arrested with me protesting? Oh my gosh, get arrested! I'm gonna go to a federal, do me in the butt prison. And it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. As even a potential consequence of this, quantify the risk. And most people that they see the risk.
And depending on what you're picked up for, you're not going to spend that much time in there. They don't want you in there. They want, you're filling up a bed. That's like somebody going into the hospital with a cold and saying, "I need a room," and they're like, "No, you only have a cold. Go home."
You can't. Some departments are looking for excuses to fill jails, because of the money behind it. But in D.C., it's almost the same thing as what you were experiencing, where they just bust you out of there. It's like, well, we got to maintain order. We got to get these protesters out of here. So we have to come up with an excuse to arrest them. But in D.C., they can't just relocate you. There's a little more legal scrutiny, so they have to have an actual thing to charge you with, a real reason to arrest you. And so they would give us a citation, and it would be like a $50 ticket. And that's how they would break up a protest, right, to get the hippies off the streets. And
make a little money in the process.
That most of them will never pay the ticket and be afraid to come back.
Yeah. It's like when I got arrested for dancing at the Jefferson Memorial. It was a $100 fine, and I could have just paid it, but we went to court because it was like, I'm not going to pay the dance tax. You guys can screw yourselves. Let's go to court. Let's have fun with this. And then, right before, like the very first thing, once the actual court was in session, they just dismissed it because they didn't want to deal with it. They realized, you're more trouble than you're worth. So the other thing about this, and I hope this opens up maybe a broader topic of conversation for us, and this is a really good setup for this, is the reward side of the equation. And for a lot of people who aren't fortunate enough, as I am, to have fallen over backwards into full-time activism by winning the lottery 10 times in a row as an activist, really, I'm not that smart. I'm not that good looking, but it's just been one thing after another for me that has kept me going. And right now I'm kind of cruising, on a lot of momentum. But to have gotten to the point I'm at right now, I really did. I had the right attitude, I had the right skill set, but my success as an activist is a lot like having won the lottery 10 times in a row. You maybe you don't see, well, not in a row. I shouldn't say in a row. But it's like, I bought 1,000 lottery tickets and I won 10 times, which is still like a ridiculous winning
Pretty good.
streak,
Yeah, that's
right?
ridiculously good odds. Mm-hmm.
I've taken a lot of shots that I've missed. Let's just put it that way, and part of it, and you guys understand that part of activism is trying things that are probably going to fail. And if you do, it's like if you had a 1 in 100 chance of winning the lottery, heck yeah, you would go buy 100 lottery tickets. You'd go buy 1,000 lottery tickets, right? And this is where I think most people fail to see the reward side of the equation. And it's not just the glory and the fame and, that people want to shake your hand and say, aren't you the guy that did that or did that
I got a question for you. Because I didn't realize you had such a background in activism itself. And actually I have two questions for you. What got you into it first? And considering the circumstances of, like, today, like what people are going through today with, like Bo is always pointing out, why are you people on the freeway shutting down traffic of these innocent people who aren't beating you up and killing your citizens? And why don't you go protest police brutality at the, what kind of advice would you give, like, people today that are going out there?
Well, I certainly appreciate the tactic of shutting down freeways. I don't think your point is valid, but so would the counterpoint to that the police are supported by the general population. Without the support of the general population, bad people aren't empowered to escape accountability and be paid by theft.
But let's look at this from an advertising perspective. Like, if, say, you're an advertiser, your goal as an advertiser is to get people attracted to your product. If you're literally stopping people on their commute, their daily commute. One, that's bad advertising because now they're looking at you going, "Oh my God, I hate these people."
Right.
You know?
Totally with you. And for Black Lives Matter at this point, they don't need to do that. They are a fixture. They are successful. They are part of the conversation. They don't need to block freeways to get attention. A lesser-known cause, that might be legitimate when you really are struggling for that basic attention. So you're right, and that's a great tactical argument to make. But what if it's a war that's about to happen? You know, like the people, like I protest, you know, I was a Marine who went to Fallujah, who volunteered to go, but I was still against the war, and I went to the Day of Student Walkouts in February 2003 before the March 19 invasion, and, you know, we just had to say, we want to stop this, and if anything, if those anti-war protesters, if we had done more interference activism, if we had sat in on the roads outside of bases, which is kind of combining the two approaches strategically that we're talking about here, then, you know, we could have had a greater impact. Maybe we could have prevented the war from happening.
Scott, can you hear me? Okay.
Hello?
Well,
I'm still here.
Adam, you there?
Hello?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. You cut out there for a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you, Scott.
I want to get back to this, and if we can bring it back to strategy and tactics, but I'd like to present this better framework for analysis on the benefit side. And a lot of people don't go and protest because they don't see the positive value in it, or they don't engage in activism because they don't see the positive value in it. And one of the things that I see is not just for myself building a career as an activist, building a reputation, building potential, but that there is something much bigger we are working towards. And 95+% of activists really don't have any sense of this at all. They see problems, they want to fix them. And that's great and that's noble, but it's not enough to really understand the full potential benefit. And I would just point to the civil rights era activists who are alive today who get to tell their kids, we don't live in a segregated society because I was a part of that. On a bigger scale even than that today, and this is what's in my book, Freedom, which you can get for free at thefreedomline.com, is this view to the future of where we are going as a society becoming less violent. And this I get from Steven Pinker, the Harvard professor who gave a great TED Talk on the subject, that as a species we are living in the least violent times, the most peaceful times in human history. Statistically speaking, you are less likely today than ever before to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being. And if you're not a libertarian, you're not going to get this. If you don't first understand that freedom is about nonviolence, that it's about the non-aggression principle, that it's about respect for fellow human beings, that it's about basic human rights being respected universally, you won't see that we have come so far, and yet the one thing that is currently holding back humanity is government. We have embraced a higher standard of ethics. We have embraced, as just on a daily basis, a much higher standard of how we get along and respect each other. And yet we carve out this area, this exception to ethics called government. Don't hit, don't steal, unless you're a cop or an IRS agent or a soldier. You know, these aren't just sort of universals, but that, and this is the great evil of democracy. And it's hard to deny the virtues of democracy when you compare it to monarchy or oligarchy or whatever, you know, totalitarianism, socialism, communism that came before democracy.
Even the theoretical physicist Michio Kaku was on RT being interviewed. And I got to hand it to the interviewer. I don't know her name, but she kind of pushed the issue. And he said all he could come up with for an argument was, show me a better system. And I was screaming at the television going, that's not an argument. That is not an argument.
Well,
when the question is it morally virtuous?
Because you can't just See, like I say all the time, you can't just throw the system we have away because that leaves a vacuum. And a vacuum is more dangerous than what we have.
Well, the vacuum argument,
unless you can fill that vacuum with a better system before you throw it away.
That's also a very false argument. I mean, if I say, hey, you've got cancer, would you like me to cut your tumor out of you? Well, I don't really want you to cut out this tumor because I don't know what you're going to replace it with.
It's a scaredy cat argument, really. It's a fear argument. It's an argument based on, I'm afraid of what might happen if we don't have it because I don't know what will happen. Because nobody knows what will happen. That's the point. Nobody knows. There
is one sense in which the power vacuum argument is legitimate. If we say that we want a stateless society because we want an ethical society, to say we're just going to shoot all the politicians and shoot all the cops and soldiers and just get rid of all the bureaucrats, kill them all, that's not the answer for a lot of reasons. But the reason it's important to understand that is that those people are supported by the general population. The paradigm of today is statism, which says violence is okay if it has enough public support and is done by government. So if we say we don't want to do that anymore,
the really bad part about that is the fact that the majority doesn't even vote. So if we were going to go by majority rule, the majority doesn't even want a part of this. They don't care about it. They don't care about politics. They don't even want it. But they're afraid to say...
That's a good thing. That might be a good thing.
It is a good thing. It is. Yeah. But this is how, people like Hitler got elected when, 10% voted for him?
The less people participate, the less and less appealing it is, and the more it will shrink until hopefully it just shrinks to the point where it's gone.
Well, I don't think that's quite the answer either. I mean, in a sense, yes. But there's another way out of this. And we have to have a social consensus to stop doing the government thing. And I don't think it's going to happen by people not voting. I think people who don't vote are split between people who don't care and people who know that 99% of their time voting is a waste of time. And the exceptions are when you actually have a candidate who's an ethical candidate, and the only ethical candidate is a libertarian because anything else is a form of statism, which is a form of governance of violent control. Or when you have a ballot measure that is actually going to reduce the amount of coercion of the state, like marijuana legalization is a great example of that, where coming out and voting has caused positive change in society. So it's not, I think we're more likely, and I'll tell you how I'm banking on this if you guys want to hear about what I'm working on as in my long-term plans. And it's that we're going to have,
for you.
we're going to get to a point of social consensus where we say, hey, we shouldn't be doing this government thing anymore. And I think that what we have in the democratic process is that it is a step forward from monarchies in the sense that it used to be you could say, hey, God said I'm the king, so screw you, I'm in charge, I'm the king. And now if you want to screw people and dominate people and exploit people the way that the king used to, you have to say, well, I had public support, enough people voted for me, so now I can screw everybody however I want. That is going to change. And in order that what that does is it makes it harder. It makes it more difficult for the authoritarian personality types to take on that power and convince the enforcement class, those who wield the guns of government, to do their bidding. So it is my belief...
Except, Adam, if I can interject one thing, because this is also another question, and it goes along the lines of voting and everything we're talking about right now. And this is also something we asked McAfee. The rigging elections. It's not a secret that only 2 corporations are allowed to count votes in this country, and at least one of them have already been proven to be so easily rigged. And the only way you would know it's rigged is if you did a paper ballot in concert with the electronic ballot, which nobody does. and nobody's allowed to see their software.
There's another. You can have electronic voting and have full public transparency. There's a way to do it. But
I'm not
you're
saying
right.
it can't be done. I'm saying they're not going to let that happen. So how do you kind of get that done?
Hold on,
when we don't have a say
it's
in the company's
it's like the police body cams and all that stuff. They're arguing now, well, what's going to happen to the footage of these police body cams? And I instantly said they should be live streamed to a public terminal.
Oh yeah, totally.
Totally.
I mean, if you really
I was reading a couple of articles where that was not only suggested, which kind of made me proud of myself, but it was recommended to keep their safety and our safety as transparent and intact as possible.
I have to apologize again. My hearing is not so great. I can't tell your voices apart sometimes, but I think it was Scott who raised this point about voting and elections being rigged. And I totally agree. Oh, excuse me. Okay, well, Bo, I totally agree with the premise of your point that elections are manipulated. However, it's important to note that there is a very important check how much they can cheat elections. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No, not quite. Go ahead.
Exit polls. That's it. And I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that this is purely a matter of rigging elections. They can manipulate them. They can control them. But ultimately, what their power rests on is the buy-in of the public and the paradigm of statism. So my point is, if you had an election that was going 70-30 for the Democrat or the Republican, right, they couldn't go, oh, hey, it turns out everybody was lying in the exit polls, and when they were in the voting booths, they really voted for the other guy.
Well, it's usually not that close, though. That far apart. It's usually a lot closer.
Well, I have a prime example of rigging the elections. The last time I went, it was the last election. Governor Gary Johnson was supposed to be on the ballot. And I had gotten word through a friend that he wasn't even on the ballot. So when I went down there, with my nephew, and I said, you go in there and you vote, because I knew who he was voting for and all that. I'm not going to say anything. And you tell me who's on the ballot when you come out. And if he's on there, I'll go in to vote. And he wasn't.
Well, it wasn't on there. But this is in Las Vegas where they use a touch screen.
My candidate didn't even make it to a button.
They don't play ball.
There was no selection for my candidate at all when there was supposed to be.
So in order to overcome their ability to manipulate elections, it just means that we have to develop a supermajority. And that is true about any major socio-political change that you want to bring about. In order to overturn the status quo, you can't just come with 51% because there will be resistance. I don't want to try to dissolve this government with 51% support. I want to do it with 90% support. We're the only people who are saying, no, we need to keep doing this violent statism thing are the government employees. And if you haven't heard, for those of you in the audience perhaps who aren't familiar with what I'm working on right now, I am running for not president in 2020. That is, if you want someone to be not president and you want to have no president and no federal government, I'm your guy. If you vote for me, if I am elected in 2020, it will be to go in and sign a single executive order declaring the federal government of no authority, appointing appropriate administrators to dissolve the agencies in a responsible manner and return the physical property as directly to the people as possible, to declare all federal land open for homesteading, and that's the end of it. No more federal government at all. And some people raise the question, hey, Adam, if we establish a stateless society, what's going to stop some people from coming up and saying, well, we're going to be a government now, we want to form our own violent monopoly here. Well, in order for them to do that, they need a certain amount of social buy-in. They're going to have to be able to go to the people and say, hey, remember when we had all of those wars, and remember how we had the police state, and remember how we used to pay all those taxes? wasn't that wonderful? Let's do that again. Not going to happen. Once you abolish the federal government and such prosperity is restored in this country, the potential of our just individual entrepreneurship and the ability of the individual to thrive is restored, people are going to want more of it. And this is the brilliance of the concept of localization, which is laid out in Chapter 10 of my book, again, available for free at thefreedomline.com. You start taking governments apart from the top down. You don't pull the rug out from underneath anyone in doing so. And once you get down to the local community level, you will be able to transition to nonviolent systems in a way that meets everyone's needs far better than the current system.
Well, I got to say, you're by far the most confident anarchist I think that we've talked to on this show. Because aside from myself, everybody else is rather cynical about anarchy, and they usually poo-poo it and give me a billion reasons why they don't think anyone would go along with it and why it would fail immediately, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I know you've heard all the arguments. My roads and all that type of stuff.
Yeah. I've spent too much time waking people up. They don't go back to sleep. This is an inevitable course of the progress of humanity. We are becoming less violent. Statism is violent, and we will eventually eliminate the practice entirely.
Yeah. I think a good place to start is with our kids. I think a good place to start is how we raise them. You know, if you don't raise them to think that it's normal for people to do what government does.
That's hard. And I'll tell you why. I got a good example. I just saw, what the hell was the name of the movie? It's a Dr. Seuss thing. Just saw it tonight with the elephant. He hears the damn thing on the
Horton Hears the Who.
That's it. Horton Hears the Who. Well, during that, he's trying to get the Who's up to the mountain to be safe, and there's this one little kangaroo that gathers up all the jungle animals, and that was a part of her speech was, it'll be disorder, it'll be anarchy, and that's what she ended with. That was her point, was for stopping him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to get past that mystique when so
people
many
use the word
aspects
incorrectly.
Are using, and they use it as this tactic of fear. What do you want it to be? Anarchy? And I don't know how many times I've turned around and said, we ain't tried it yet.
Yeah.
So
the only people I could think of that's tried it is Spain for a few years, and then they were kind of invaded or at least taken over by nearby communists, which
because there wasn't
Spain in the 30s.
There wasn't a solid public understanding of the principles of freedom as ethics, and that's what's changing. And just to get another shameless plug in here, this is what my book does. In 100 pages, in a free 3-hour audiobook, it is the ultimate red pill. It is the easiest way to wake someone up to this message, to get them to understand what it is that this is really all about. And I don't object to the term anarchy when it's properly understood as no rulers. But even then, I don't think it really applies to what I'm talking about, because it's not that I want no rulers, it's that I want self-rule, self-government.
Right.
And that only you can control yourself.
That's one of the things I have constantly when I'm talking to people and trying to wake them up. It's like, and they say, well, we need good leadership. And it's like, no, we need good representation, because that's what this country was founded on. You elect these people not to lead you, but to represent you. And then that has been misconstrued and twisted over the years to form this freaking oligarchy that's in place now.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we need to get back to that.
Why should anybody? Why should we not be able to all represent ourselves? And compared to anarchist, and again, just because the word has been so distorted and skewed and come to mean so many other things, what accurately describes much better what I'm talking about is voluntarist. Because some people will say don't we need this and this and this in society? And I say, absolutely. And then they'll say, isn't that government? So, well, you're not defining government properly, because if it's voluntary, it's not government. If it's not coercive and violent, it's not government. If it's by voluntary participation, it's not government. So for me, the term that I like to describe myself in that sense, again, libertarian is that you believe in the doctrine of free will, that you own yourself, and therefore the non-aggression principle is the only legitimate foundation of ethics. And what this means specifically is voluntarism, that all human interactions should be voluntary, should be free of violence and coercion, like don't hit, don't steal, don't kill, basic ethical tenets. You can't make an exception because you call yourself government. You can't make an exception because people voted for it. You can't make an exception because you have a badge.
Right. Now, what would you say people should do on like a day-to-day basis? What would you say on like a day-to-day make a difference type of measure that the average Joe, in your opinion, would be a good measure for them to take?
There's two things that when you wake up you should be doing to fully live by the values of freedom. And one of them is living free. And this is actually a section in the book, chapter 9, personal freedom. And it talks about emotional freedom. And most people are comfortable going, hey, this is propaganda, it's manipulation, and it's to make you feel this way so that you will be more submissive. And it's like, okay, well then what's the opposite of that? It's emotional freedom, being able to have that complete respect for your self-will, excuse me, and to determine your state of mind at any time as a free, independent human being. And so then you come to live by these values. You understand that paying taxes is enabling violence. That when you pay taxes, that's money that the government uses to hurt people. And you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't empower violent people to be more violent. You shouldn't, put a gun in a murderer's hand. Simple as that. And so you're willing to then make what some people think of as sacrifices, like give up the corporate job, give up the mainstream lifestyle. But really, this is a chance to elevate yourself, to live better. And it might mean that you have to seek your creature comforts in a different way, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up quality of life. If anything, it is an enhancement of quality of life to live more in line with your values. And then there's so many other things that go along with this, how you interact with cops, how you interact with your fellow human beings based on a standard of ethics. And then the second thing, so that's the first sort of thing, is to live freedom. So, and for me, I'm right now, because my assistant here just pulled up, great guy Eden, who is my ranch manager here at Freedom Ranch. I'm setting up a homestead. I'm building a home, and I'm walking around the tires that we've got laid out for the floor plan of my home, which is an Earthship style, fully off-grid, self-sustaining thermal mass home. It requires no heating and cooling, and is it has a greenhouse built in, and we have a bird run where we get a dozen eggs every day, and turkeys and chickens, and eventually rabbit and quail, so that we are completely self-sustaining. And in this world where if you're going to interact with people publicly, like if you're going to buy food from someone at a supermarket, you're going to be paying taxes. You're going to be feeding into the Monsanto food production system. So living this way, opting out of it, living by these values is one thing. You get to live more free, you get to live happier, and you get to respect your own will on a day-to-day basis instead of being subject to the influence of the violent people who want to exploit you and take advantage of you. So anyway, that's the first thing, the category of what you do with this message when you wake up. The second thing...
before we go into overtime, what's the name of your book?
Freedom. I thought we were doing an hour.
No, it's a 45-minute show. And we're actually, we've got, 6 minutes left. So. Okay.
Well, then I can wrap this up. This is the most important thing, and it's really, really simple. When you get this message and you understand that it improves your life and it is making a better world for future generations, you want to share this message with other people. And that's why I wrote the book, again, to be the ultimate red pill. You don't have to sit people down and argue with them. In fact, if you're arguing or debating, you're doing it wrong. The people who came up with oral hygiene weren't bullying people into brushing their teeth. All they had to do was smile and say, hey, you want to keep your teeth? And that's all it took. If you're arguing with people, you're doing it wrong. If you want to share this message, you got to be patient and you got to be positive. Not everybody's going to get it right away. Some people have a lot of abuse and cognitive dissonance and propagandization that they have to overcome that is unique to their experience. So being patient, planting seeds, inviting people, and sharing them. So the second thing is be patient, be positive. Hey, I've got something that's made my life better, that has empowered me to live richer. Can I share it with you? Would you like to hear about it? Hey, I'm living more free and happy as a result of this knowledge. Nobody's going to say, I don't know, living free and happy, that sounds good and all, but who's going to build the roads? You see what I'm saying?
Right.
You just bypass all of that cognitive dissonance, all of that resistance when you take this approach. And what I've done with the book is made it incredibly easy to introduce people to this message, to increase their awareness and improve their lives, because that's really what we should be striving to do just as activists, right? We want to make the world a better place. We don't want to make people feel bad. We don't want to make people feel wrong. I mean, this is something I struggle with myself because I tortured people in Fallujah, personally tortured people. I wasn't, one of the guys pulling out fingernails and electrocuting people at Abu Ghraib, but I crossed some lines guarding detainees and that experience haunts me to this day. And I will beat myself up about it probably until the day I die. But we don't want people to feel that. It makes it harder for them to come around. We want them to feel good. We want them to share the joy of freedom that this message gives to us.
Well,
and if you don't have that, you're doing it wrong. If it doesn't make your life better, if you're not having fun.
I really love what you're saying, man, and don't beat yourself up about that shit because, at the time you thought you were doing what was right. So...
yeah, I know.
It's one of those things that's hindsight, and don't beat yourself up over that shit.
Well, we've all got our demons to battle.
And I'm really thankful you came on the show. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You've been very insightful. And what's your show?
Well, I don't really do I used to do a big live production 3 hours a night, but I'm really more focused on what I'm doing, building for the long term, building my homestead. I'm actually fighting the county right now who's trying to tell me that I don't have the right to even move dirt around on my own land or camp here for more than 10 days in a row, which is kind of silly because you can camp on public land here for 2 weeks without any special permit. And I'm being fined $750 a day.
Camp on your own land? That's what they're telling you?
Yeah, let alone build a house. So 26 violations here that are costing me supposedly $750 a day. If you want to help out with that, please go to my Facebook page, check out the event I've got there. It's just facebook.com/AdamCharlesKokesh. It's my personal page. And we've got a rally and call flood scheduled around the hearing that they're threatening us with, these extortionists. But what I do a live show on Facebook every day. I do half an hour at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, and I do YouTube videos. We just hit 200,000 subscribers and 50 million views. Great benchmarks for me here. So youtube.com/AdamKokesh if you want to get to that. But more importantly, thefreedomline.com. Thefreedomline.com. You can get my books for free in every digital format possible, including an audio book. It's only 3 hours long. It's just 100 pages. You have no excuse. And if you want to share this message with someone, you can say, look, can you give me 15 minutes? Let's just listen to the first 15 minutes of the audiobook. It's the first chapter, and you'll get the overview. This is something that's important to me, that makes my life better. Can I please share it with you? And if that's a friend or a family member and they say, no, screw you, I'm not going to take 15 minutes for your whatever, you should probably reconsider those relationships. And you know what? There's a certain triage. There's a certain number of people who are not going to come around until they see that it's the popular thing. They're just, certain, like